Okay, you've been listening to me for a while, so you know that one of my pet conversations is the topic of having difficult conversations, having those tough conversations that you're afraid to have. Tim Ferriss says everything that you want is on the other side of a difficult conversation. One of my mentors read the Rising Leader Handbook and he distilled it down. He wanted to give me a pithy little one liner, and he said, if you're having trouble with your leadership, you're not having enough tough conversations. And before we turned on the mic, I was talking to my guests, and I said, the reason this is so important to me is because my journey to becoming a coach, my spiritual journey, my growth and evolution was because I could not have difficult conversations. I could not speak my mind. I could not speak my truth. I didn't like conflict. I like to assimilate. So when I learned to have those conversations, my world grew. Uh, so it's a big part of everything I write. It's a big part of everything I talk about. And it's a big part of what we're going to be doing today in this conversation. Officially, my guests are Gene Hammett and his lovely wife, Amanda Hammett. Gene is a leading authority on executive team alignment and high growth leadership with over 40 million in revenue across the companies that he's led. Gene is the host of a podcast called Growth Think Tank and has interviewed over 730 CEOs to uncover core principles of fast growth, guiding numerous Inc. 5,000 companies to double and triple growth. That's some numbers that you can lean on. He's listed as one of the top speakers in 2020 for Inc. magazine. Amanda, co-founder and CEO of Core Elevation, is globally recognized as a leader in leadership development and next generation talent retention, which we all need because we're all trying to fill these positions and grow people from the inside. She advises Fortune 500 executives and Inc. 5,000 founders on transforming organizations to boost employee retention. She also co-created the Leadership On-Ramp program, helping companies turn managers into leaders amid hypergrowth. The reason they're here, besides the fact that I really like them and enjoy their company, is together they wrote and co-authored the book, How to Have Tough Conversations, the framework for great leaders to say what needs to be said when the pressure is on. What a great title. Amanda, Gene, thanks for being here.
Thank you,
Thanks
Mark,
for
for
having
having
us.
me.
So this is going to be great. I got a husband and wife on, and we're going to decide who's going to talk and when, and we're going to all be stepping on each other, and it's going to be a great conversation. So when I first started talking to you, Gene, about, you and I just had reconnected and we were talking about different things. And you mentioned that you and Amanda wanted to write a series of books that didn't have a lot of fluff, didn't have a lot, like it wasn't a big book. It was basically a manual on how to do things as a leader. And the first one is this, is that, tell us about writing this book and who you wrote it for.
Yeah, that's a pretty good example. I mean, it goes back a little bit further. I wrote a book that was officially called, or the working title was Help, I Need Leaders Now. And I wrote it with Amanda, and we wrote the book. We have different writing capacities as people do, right? I write pretty steadily, and she had to lock herself, wait, and wait a little bit more, and locked herself in an Airbnb for 3 days and wrote her half of the book. But we step back from that and just looking at it goes, it's too long. It's too much to try to put into one, book for someone to absorb. And my coach had challenged me as like, well, which element of the book, which chapter, if you will. So I think it's chapter 18 end up becoming a book. And they joked at me and they're like, oh, you're going to have a tough conversation with your wife about tough conversations, and that being your next book. And it actually went really smooth. She took it like a champ, and she's like, yeah, I know we just wrote this book, but you're right. We need to write the book about how to have tough conversations.
Love it. Amanda, tell me about your relationship with this topic, since you work with emerging leaders, bringing young talent on board. What's your relationship with this topic?
Honestly, this is something I see every single day in my own coaching of these emerging early leaders, up to, leaders who have been leading teams for 20 years. And we're still having this conversation about, oh, I need to have it, but I just don't want to. And so it was very much a need, because there are a lot of books out there. There's a lot of articles out there talking about how you need to have tough conversations. It's so important. It's so important. But the feedback we were getting for years was, but I need that step by step. And Gene and I literally sat down on the couch in my office one day years ago and said, we're going to knock this out. And that was version 1. It has been tweaked many times since then. But the current version, the current framework has been battle tested through thousands of conversations at this point.
So the way you laid it, the way you laid out the book is,
Mm-hmm.
you start out with the types of conversations. What's going to bring up a tough conversation? What are some of the things that happen that need the skill?
Oh, everything from performance to punctuality. You'd be surprised how much personal hygiene comes up in the office.
No, I wouldn't.
But everything that you are thinking, everything that you've ever faced, it definitely comes up. We've seen it in practice. Every time a leader comes to me, it's like, I'm embarrassed to tell you this. It's like, this is not the first time I've heard this issue. It's probably not even the first time this week I've heard this issue. So anything you can think of, Mark.
Yeah, Gene, you have chapter 2 is the epidemic of avoiding conflict, which, while Amanda was talking, I was thinking about CEOs of billion-dollar companies that I work with. And the reason I have a job as an executive coach is because they don't want to have some of these difficult conversations. Why would you call it an epidemic of avoiding conflict?
I'm not trying to put you out of business, Mark.
Yeah, no, don't worry. I don't think either one of us are going out of business.
There's enough people that struggle with this that we can both survive. This epidemic, I mean, it started with small things with people. Like, I remember one story, a CEO of like a $20 million company said, you've got someone internally doing PowerPoint slides. It's like, cool. And he goes, but he doesn't have grammar very well. He misspells things all the time. I'm like, that's unfortunate. Like, how long has this been going on? He's like, it's been going on for a while. So, well, what happened when you had the conversation about his grammar? He goes, I've never had it. I just go behind him and fix it.
Right.
You're the $20 million company driver, and you're fixing the grammar on the slides every time. And you're not willing to have that. So what is the cost of that? Well, probably minimal, but it does add up, right? One of the stories in the book is a story, I think John, we changed the names of everyone, so it's hard for me to remember the actual changed name. But sitting down with him, he was going through a dilemma with his HR manager about new businesses coming up around there. They ran a 3PL and whatnot, and they had a bunch of warehouse workers. And he would drive into work every day and see that new warehouses were coming up in their neighborhood, and they were offering $1 per hour more than what they currently offered. But he didn't want to have the conversation with his HR manager because she had already told him, you're a little bit more controlling, you're a little bit more micromanaging, let me just handle my job. And so he resisted. And for months, he watched the same thing happen. Well, one day they lost dozens of employees. The next day they lost another dozen. The next day they lost more and more and more until they finally stopped the bleeding. And I said, as you reflect back on that, do you know what it cost you? And he goes, unfortunately, I know exactly what it cost me. It cost me $250,000. So the epidemic is real and the cost is there, but the problem is it's not available on a P&L. We don't calculate and trap this like we do our food budgets or our technology budgets on our P&L.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. I do personality testing. I use Enneagram. Other people use DISC. To figure out where people are coming from, what are their core motivations, what are their fears. So you'll have a driver who has certain kinds of conversations, and then you'll have someone who's more of a peacemaker, of maybe even avoiding having those conversations. And you even put a chapter in, again, the types of people have tough conversations. How do you kind of address all the different personalities?
Amanda, I'll let you take that one.
So this was something that was born out of what the types of personalities we were seeing, and how did we coach each group through that. The biggest piece of it is obviously your productive procrastinators. And if you haven't read the book, there's 3 types of personalities who avoid conversations. The productive procrastinators is by and large the largest of the 3 groups. Avoiders is coming in second. But basically the thing that really drives us and the thing that really drives them is like, how do you get them to see what this is costing them? How do you get them to see what this mental load is costing them, and really start to help them pinpoint for themselves to motivate them in order to have these conversations? Because the last thing that we want to do is for these issues to fester to the point where there's an explosion and you just go off the rails and start firing people left and right. That leaves you open to a lot of different liability issues, legal issues, and all of those fun things.
It's so good to have this, because a lot of this stuff comes from childhood, right? Safety. Do not confront, because the little boy or little girl inside of me is not safe having conflict, having, being authentic, and whatever it is. And, you start the book and you talk about how all this is learnable. These are skills you can learn. So having a how-to, again, helps someone who has these fears kind of baby step their way through the fears and grow. You have a chart, the 4 phases of a tough conversation. What are the 4 phases of a tough conversation?
I'll take this one because I had to fight for this one a little bit. I don't think Amanda was completely bought into the 4 phases, because I wouldn't say it was the last thing we added, but it was toward the end of the book. When I was using it with clients, I was realizing that the first conversation that you have with someone is different than the third. And a lot of times we're getting to the third and they're saying, why am I here again? Why am I having to have the same conversation with you again? And it's frustrating, and I get it. And so I started stepping back from that, and I was like, all right, well, what if we did put these into 4 phases? How would we use it? And so the first phase is understand and clarify, which is simply, mimicking the Stephen Covey stuff about, seek to understand, then to be understood.
Mm-hmm.
But it really is about being curious about what's going on with the person. Instead of lashing out and saying you did it wrong, you're asking questions. You're being more of a coach in that phase than you are in the others. The second phase is name the pattern. So if you're having to get to another conversation, or maybe it's a third or fourth, you want to be able to name the pattern, which is not about naming the person, because I've had some leaders that have said some colorful words inside of our conversations about how people are showing up, but it's about looking at the pattern. One of the clearest examples I can give you is someone who doesn't show up for the meeting. They're not just late, they're disrespecting everyone. If you have the conversation on showing up late, it's very different than if you have the conversation on disrespecting the team. It hits you much deeper when it's impacting others, whereas you being late is about you and your time management or lack thereof.
Mm-hmm.
So that's
the impact of the pattern is disrespectful.
Exactly. And then the third one is if it gets to this point, it's time to truly be direct. So that's the third phase is be direct, which is where you lay it out there where they can't misunderstand it. This might be a PIP in some of you's language. I have another client that calls it a memorandum of understanding. And they will document it formally about what you're expected in this role. And it is really, to me, you have to go through this before you're going to fire someone, because if you go into it and just fire someone without them knowing it, it's really poor leadership, in my opinion. They should never be surprised. They should have a couple of lead up conversation, and maybe they get to this phase 3, be direct, and look, you're not really paying attention to the details you need to. Maybe it's your grammar, maybe it's your disrespect of the team, whatever it may be, but you're being direct, you're speaking in a way that can't be misunderstood. And then finally, the 4th phase is the exit. We can't exit all relationships, but we can decide not to invest energy into them. We can decide not to continue to be friends. But in business, sometimes you have to exit people. And I don't think it's a bad thing. I think it's actually what I've seen, because I'm sure Mark, you've seen a lot of people that have had to go through the firings of other people. Those people that are on the firing block, if you will, they aren't happy. Right. Typically. They aren't really able to live themselves. They're not able to be themselves. They're walking on eggshells, or they don't feel like they belong there. And so I think the exit really is, another word for it is, you're just setting them free to go be at a place that's right for them. And if you look at it from that way, it's a little bit easier to have that conversation. But so those are the 4 phases. I can repeat them for you if you want me to.
I got it. It's understanding and clarify. It's name the pattern, be direct, and exit. Because I take notes.
Yeah.
So what's the magic question?
Gene, I'm going to let you take this one, because this is really your job.
Being a coach, you come up with coaching questions that you go to quite a lot. I don't know if we don't have the same style, Mark, but I know that you've been trained by some great people, and there's some questions you probably like more than others. And I would listen to a CEO or some executive of a fast growing company, and they would complain about Susan or Jeff or Jack. And they complain and complain and complain. I'm learned, I know part of coaching is listening because they don't have someone to talk to about these things.
Right.
They can't go to their executive team. They can't go to their board. Sometimes they can't go to their wife because their wife's tired of hearing it. And they come to a coach to have these different conversations. So I'll let them go on. Maybe it's 3 minutes, maybe it's 4 minutes sometimes.
They need to they even need to be a place to be a victim. They have to be like not a leader for a little bit, just, let their guard down. So yeah.
I agree with you because I have stolen something from, I think, Rich, because I know you trained with Rich. Hide nothing and hold nothing back.
Right.
And I use that inside of my conversations to set up a framework. And it's that I want them to be, if they feel like the victim, I want them to tell me how they've been disrespected.
Exactly.
And they get it out. And then I come to what I end up naming the magic question. I don't name it for my clients. I had to name it for
Here's the magic question.
But I'll ask them the question, which is, what is the missing conversation that you haven't had yet? Fill in the blank. And they're like, oh, okay. So then they start thinking about this. So now we move into solutioning, right? Instead of being a victim.
Hold on. I want to slow down on that one because that is such that it's not confrontational in a way that they're wrong, that they're bad. It's just kind of teeing it up and showing you like there's a way to go from victimhood. There's a way to go from where you are to what you want. And it's just through that magic question. I love that.
I remember one of my clients had gone on vacation, and one of the kind of plays I will run before you go on vacation, meet with everyone on your team and make sure they're clear about what they're expected to do. Because my hope is that every leader that goes on vacation can actually go on vacation. My wife has taught me this lesson. I haven't always been that person. I've been the person that would work in the mornings or squeeze in a few meetings here and there. And it really does distract, not just from the family and the connection you have, but from your ability to recharge. And so my belief is that we should go on vacation and really be on vacation. So you have a meeting before you go on vacation and you set the intentions, you be explicit, all that stuff. It's not a tough conversation. It's just like, what are you working on? What are your deadlines? What does good look like? All the things that they want to know. So he did that with everyone on his team. And he comes back and one person didn't do the work. And so now they're behind. And I go, what's the missing conversation you haven't had yet? And he goes, well, how are we going to catch up? So, well, that's one conversation, but is that really the heart of it? And he comes back and says, are they still committed to being here? And I was like, that's it. What if you had that conversation? And we talked about it for a few minutes. He goes off, has the conversation. I will tell you, I mean, this is one of the things that this happened years ago. And every time it comes up, I think about it because he goes, they're doing great. It's never been an issue since that one conversation. Now, I'm not saying this happens every time. I wish it did. I wish we were one and done with every conversation we had. But in this case, he got to the heart of it. And this person said, I am committed to being here. I am loyal to you. I'm sorry I let you down. Let's rebuild this trust. Mm-hmm. That's the kind of conversation that changes behavior. That missing conversation has been the most asked question, I think, in my coaching over the last 12 years.
It's such a gateway to where you want to go. So for me, one of the things I stress a lot is if I can get you grounded and present, I don't have to play whack-a-mole with a lot of behaviors. Like if I can get you in the moment, if I can get you in relationship, if I can get you here and now, and you even have a whole section on how presence is essential. Why is that essential to be able to have good, tough conversations, productive, tough conversations?
Amanda?
I'm sorry, my internet cut out, and so I missed half of that.
Okay, so I'll leave the preamble. So you talk about in the book that presence is essential to being effective and having what the result that you want from these tough conversations. Why is that important?
Oh gosh, the presence piece is something that I think people think that they are doing well for the most part. But it's something that there are so many distractions in our lives. We are not doing it as well as we should be, and not showing other people respect the way that we should be showing them. These little devices, sitting on our desk and how distracting they can be, and the notifications popping up. Even if we're not responding in that moment, it is distracting. I've had so many conversations with leaders about, hey, when you're having a conversation that has career implications, you should not be checking your email. You should not be reading something else. You should have your laptop down eye to eye because this matters. You need to be with this person in this moment. And when we do exercises that flips that and shows them what it's like to be on the receiving end, it's like, oh, I don't like that as much. And so I think that's one of the big lessons in this particular book and in our framework is like really honing in on that presence piece and making sure that we are all practicing presence a lot more.
Right. Again, because these tough conversations are about relationship. It's not just about the result. It's not just it's about being in relationship to find out what's the best solution. Even if the best solution is we part ways, it's being in relationship, and then you have something worthwhile, at the end that you can build on. I love that. The other thing I love about the book is, you go through everything. You go through, emotional regulation during these times, and you've turned over every rock, and help people. So thank you for writing the book. Thank you for being here. We're going to put all your links in the show notes because you have tools for people and all kinds of stuff. But if people want more of you, where can they find you?
I would say the best place to go is coreelevation.com. That's the home of the business. The book is on howtohavetoughconversations.com. It's not very fancy, and it's long, but you can't forget it. It's on the neon sign behind me.
It's not as fancy as your neon sign, I will say that.
But that's the best place to go to get it. I mean, you can find, Growth Think Tank podcast, all that stuff. Sorry for having so many assets, but as you've been in business for more than 10 years, you just start to grow, and we really are creating a huge impact with the companies we work with. We don't just really work with one person anymore in companies. We're working across it to create leadership at all levels, which I think is really important as companies want to transform. It's, the CEO getting coaching is great, but what about the VPs, the directors, the managers? So thank you for the work that you're doing, Mark, with, your Rising Leader handbook and all of the things that you do for leaders as well.
Thank you. I appreciate that. So we're going to put all that in the show notes. So when you get home, you don't have to remember any of this. You can just click on it. Amanda, Jean, thank you for being here.
Oh, Mark, thank you so much for having us. It has been a pleasure to be with you.
Thanks, Mark.
To everybody else, your time and attention is precious to me. I appreciate it. I hope you got some value out of this conversation. Let me know. I love you. Have a great rest of the day.